Howdy there everybody, it's Ethan Hardy. I wanted to give you a quick unedited shop tour and update you on what's going on around the shop and with me. And so we'll start in here. I don't know how much this has changed since the last time you may have seen this, but we have a couple power hammers. I'll go through some of this for people that have never seen this before. This here is a Hawkeye Helve hammer. This is a 25-pound Little Giant. It's a 3 horsepower Lister vertical engine. Here's some newly acquired line shaft building material. So the line shaft eventually I'm sure will go up on this wall and then be run off the engine, and then the 2 power hammers will run off the line shaft, and probably that little grinder over there as well. This here's kind of cool. This is some steam hose, and I use that to run a new implement, a new machine that you will see, not implement, but which you will see. Over here we have a whole bunch of leg vices on the floor, or not leg vices, gosh, post drills. A stack of anvils, Peter Wright anvil, and a collet collection. You could call it a collection. This is a forge here, a brick forge that myself and my dad made when we first built this shop back in, it was probably 5 years ago or so. And works fantastically, and I would use coal every day if I could, but it's very expensive, and obviously you can only kind of do one thing at a time, especially something like a hammer, which I do a lot of. Over here, again, this is kind of just a mess, but this is a woodworking bench. This is the only useful thing I ever did when I was in high school. And this, well, yeah, and this is just a wonderful woodworking bench. It's made out of fir. I also made the vise that's on it, which has had some updates since I first built it, including a metal screw, which you can see there if it'll focus. Whoopsies, instead of a wooden screw, just trust me. So that's that. To the machining side of the shop, same thing. We got the same Carolina bandsaw still going strong. The same reeder grinder still going strong. I would totally recommend this grinder. They're REEDER reeder out of Texas. Wonderful. This is the 2 horsepower model. I have a Bradford lathe over here set up, a G&E shaper, a 16-inch shaper set up, and then this like 12-foot long steam locomotive roundhouse lathe that came out of a local roundhouse. This is also a little 7-inch South Bend shaper. It's a really cool little deal. I recently bought a South Bend lathe, a little like gunsmithing South Bend lathe, and it'll look really nice with this. Over in here, I know you want to see that, but first we'll start over here. This is the 100 weight All Days and Onions hammer. Lots of footage of this running on the YouTube channel. Today I just finished up making 50 square circle billets. You'll probably, if you've watched the Alex Steele hammer making series, you probably know that there was a lot of that going on. Since then, since the 100 hammers build, I have made 300 more for him, and then this batch of 50 is going to go out unfinished, just the forged heads and the handles and the wedges, and then they're going to get finished by Alec and his crew. So that's that. I have a nice anvil over here that I don't think I've ever talked about. This is a French rhino pig anvil. This was made in 1880. It has some really nice stampings on it that maybe if the camera will adjust to the light, it might show you. Maybe you can you can kind of see that. So 1880, completely forged, double horn, rhino classification, because the horn, as you can see, it starts sloping about midway up the face. And then you can see that transition there. It's not like a flat face and then a horn. It slowly transitions round into the horn and then slopes up. And then pig, obviously, because it's got those little pig feet on it. And it's got the French hardy hole that comes out the dumb side for some reason, but that's okay. It's a really nice looking piece of history. And it's a 360-ish pound anvil. This is a little 25 or 24 ton McNabb press that I've retrofitted with a big 5 horsepower motor, 3600 RPM motor, which stepped up the speed quite a bit, and so that's really good for forging and mostly for punching, which is obviously what I use it for lots. Tool benches. These are this bench here and this bench are the little TV tool trays. If you're familiar with Brian Brazil's work, this is kind of something that you'll recognize. And they're a forged tool tray made mostly out of 1/2-inch square steel. They work very good. Alex Steele has a part of an online class on his Begin Blacksmithing site that'll walk you through how to make them and give you the dimensions and everything. My little forge, which is look at it, it is in horrible need of repair. It works wonderfully. Look at look at that. Everyone raves about these doors, how genius they are and wonderful. May not be genius, but they are wonderful. And it badly needs a rebuild. I'm going to rebuild this. I'm going to make it just the inside. I'm going to keep the same because it's enough volume, but I'm going to make it another inch on every dimension so I can add another inch of kale wool, because it only has 1 layer of kale wool, and that's not extremely efficient, and it would be better with 2, so I'll update that. This anvil over here, might as well talk about this. This is my favorite London pattern anvil in the shop. This is a 165-pound Buckworth, which is a Canadian-made anvil, and they were made in Ontario, I believe, and they're very rare and they're very good. They're a wrought iron with a steel face, and I like the shape, I like the proportions, I like the way that the horn is and the way that the face is, and it's just a good piece of machinery. This is the big forge, the teaching forge. It's a 1,500 cubic square inch forge, and gosh, there's just other tools strewn about. This is a welder. I don't think I've ever talked about this. This is a Smith's welder made in Minneapolis, Minnesota in the 1940s, and people often compare it to R2-D2, and it still works, and it works very well. This is a 1912 22 68 horsepower Sawyer Massey. 22 refers to the drawbar horsepower, or what it can pull, and then 68 refers to the crankshaft or the belt pulley, the flywheel horsepower. It'll obviously develop a lot more than that. This tractor will outpull a modern front wheel assist John Deere. I know because it's done it before. And so they're very, very torquey, powerful tractors. If you're not familiar, I'm a steam man. That was my original passion. I'm a licensed steam engineer. And so this engine sits in the shop, and it's a pleasure to work beside it. Okay, now we can address the thing that if you're coming here maybe from Instagram or something, you'll know this already, but this is the newest acquisition and the biggest acquisition. This is a 600-pound Niles Bement Pond steam hammer. It was built in probably the early 1920s or the early teens, or early 1920s or teens. It's a little bit older than some of the other Niles hammers out there. It doesn't have the little buffer deal at the very top of the piston there. It just uses these big heavy springs as buffers for the top of the ram, and then there's a couple other updates that are just a little different from the newer hammers. But newer is of course subjective when you're talking about something that's over 100 years old, but a modern piece of equipment as far as I'm concerned. So again, this is a 600-pound hammer. So the ram here, the weight of all the falling pieces adds up to 600 pounds. So the weight of maybe you'd call this the tub and the die and the rod, which is 2.5 inches in diameter, and the piston, which I believe on a steam hammer is very, very thick to withstand the inertia from that hammer coming and hitting. It's a 2-piece hammer, obviously. The anvil goes into the ground. This is kind of a temporary setup that I did a little cheaper, because this hammer will probably not be in this shop very long, as I will probably be moving at some point very soon. So the anvil is actually on a 1,000-pound pad of steel, which is sitting on like probably a 3,000-pound pad of concrete, and then this wood here builds up to the frame. The frame is bolted to it. I've had concerns about when the anvil is being hit, if it's going to pull, kind of push down on the base plate and then pull down on the front of the frame and cause a lot of jarring. Actually, how this is bolted is the bolts that go into the frame right there, they are bolted into the first 2 layers of wood, and this bolt here is bolted into the steel. And so there's quite a bit of buffer in between whatever shock the steel is experiencing and the base, so I assume that is okay. It does rock a little bit when it's running, but that's to be expected, and truthfully I think it's probably okay, but we'll find out sooner or later. As far as the controls that I have rigged up on this machine, it's very similar to the Grant Sarver, or the hammer that Grant Sarver had, which was a 700-pound bell. And so, of course, we have a treadle that's directly connected to a throttle. Okay, you can see how that would work right there. And then I have the motion lever attached to this right here, a hand lever that can be easily maneuvered when you're driving it in front. So I can pull down on this, and that is going to pull down the motion lever. It's extremely handy, and I will make another entire video about this machine and kind of how the controls work and how it runs. It's amazing. I'm not extremely familiar with it. I haven't run it too many hours. I only got it back in March, and so I need some time to get a little bit more comfortable, and then I could maybe make a video on the operatings and just general how it works and how to use it. I also have the motion lever connected to the treadle, just so it has a little bit of movement, prevents it from getting stuck or not cycling, and also kind of helps it to raise up to the top when you first open the throttle, and then as you push down on the treadle, it's going to lower that stroke a little bit and help just kind of help with the control. The air source for this hammer, I did run it off steam. I ran it off that engine with the steam hose that I showed right at the beginning of the video. But right now, I have it running on air. There is a 185 CFM Ingersoll Rand compressor. It's a diesel compressor. And I have 2-inch air hose, which is mighty amazing stuff. Look at how it's amazing to be familiar with the little 5/8 air hose, you know, red rubber air hose. And then you got the same thing, but it's 2 inches. It's huge. It's amazing. This is an old 500-gallon propane tank, rated for 250 psi. I will probably do a hydro test at some point soon, and just, you know, just to make me feel good about it. But you can see how this is hooked up with a T, all 2-inch pipe fittings, blah blah blah, and the hose. Now the 185 CFM is enough to run it probably flat out for maybe like all the way hard on the treadle, forging something for maybe 45 seconds or so. The valve is a little wore out. It needs some remachining, it needs some work, but that'll be addressed. And I'm not using it for a whole bunch of flat out forging. I'm using it for mostly with, you know, top tools and such. So it's getting like maybe single blows or some repetitive blows, resizing stock. My hope is I would like to do some light industrial and commercial forging, forging jackhammer bits, forging blank pieces for machine shops to machine, maybe some custom parts for the oil field or industrial sector or whatever. And if you have any recommendations, please get a hold of me. I would love to find some jobs for this. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I brought this up from Texas, and it was kind of a working hammer when I got it, but it needed a lot of work, and I put a lot of time into it. And it's just a great looking piece of history, and I love using it, and it's very cool, very cool. And it's very cool to combine my two passions of steam and blacksmithing. So, on a personal note that's interesting, I recently got engaged. I don't have a ring to show for it, obviously, but she does. Her name is Emily, and we will be moving to the city soon, which is sad. We're both farm people, but Emily will be going to school for a little while, and I will be working in a new shop, a very cool shop that I'm building with a friend of mine, and that'll be my home for just a little while. And I really look forward to bringing you along with that journey, and I think you guys are really going to want to see that and really find that interesting, the new shop and the setup and just general life things. I have one more thing to show you before I go. Almost forgot about. Back in March, the chain gang took a trip down to Montana, and one of the things that I brought back with me is this lovely pair of over 8-foot tall tongs, and these are from a railroad shop in Pennsylvania. Look at those things, just incredible. For some comparison, some of you blacksmith geeks will be familiar with the Ballard Forge tongs. I use these all the time. These are an 1.25 inch size tong. They're kind of modeled after an industrial tong, and they're decently big and heavy for, well, they were decently big and heavy for me, and most people would consider them a pretty heavy tong. but certainly not when you compare them with that monstrosity right there. They probably weigh just a little under 200 pounds, and I guess that they're for the steam hammer. They're to feed the steam hammer. If I ever need to forge some 8-inch round or anything, make some locomotive parts, that would be super cool. I have those, and I also have a slightly smaller pair of heavy tongs. Those right there, they probably fit, I think they fit about 3-inch or 3.5-inch or so. Just little, look at those, just tiny pair of bolt tongs. They're like half my height. Anyways, very cool. So, thank you guys so much for watching the little shop update and tour. And there'll be a few more videos. I want to do a video about my hammers, my rounding hammers, some information about, like people ask about the faces, how they're ground, how I use them, and just some general information about things. So I'd like to do a video about that, among other things. You'll see that coming out. And that's about it. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope the coronavirus hasn't gotten to you. And God bless. Talk to you soon.